Hey guys, how's it going? Today's video is going to be all about stats. If you don't know, I love tracking stats. I'm a huge stats nerd. I love graphs and all of that jazz. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to show you guys all of my reading stats of the year 2020 and my graphs and whatnot. But in case anybody else was interested or maybe wanted to start tracking in 2021, I am going to show you guys how I track everything, how I make my graphs, and how to use it so that you can have a copy for yourself if you want one but you don't want to actually go through the effort of making a tracking sheet. In the description below there's going to be a link to a Google Sheet. All you do is go in, copy it, have a version for yourself, and play around with it however you want. So in this video I'm basically going to be an overall tutorial on how to use the sheet. This isn't going to be my stats, that's going to be in a couple weeks, so don't get too excited. Now, I'm going to be showing you how I use the sheet, but you don't have to follow this to a T. If you want to download it, it's going to be your own stats, your own page. If there's some things you don't want to track, if there's some things you want to add, go ahead and do that. But here's just a brief overview because sometimes I know my coding looks a little bit messy, and honestly, I just wanted to show off the tracker and the graphs that I made. So now I direct you to the voiceover. So here is the handy dandy spreadsheet. The version that you see if you click the link is not going to be able to be edited, so if you want to copy for yourself, you go File, Make a Copy, and then you just name it and put it wherever you'd like. Now for a quick tutorial on how to use the spreadsheet. This tutorial is going to be pretty straightforward, so if you're not familiar with Google Sheets, that's completely fine. If you are more familiar with Google Sheets or Excel, similar type programs, then a lot of this might be kind of self-explanatory, but bear with me. So first we have the main tab that I've just called 2021, because I also have a version of this for 2019 and 2020. In the first column here we have the number, because then I can just quickly see how many books I've read. Title, just go ahead and type in the title of the book. Now the first thing you'll see, is that this one is actually red. That's because if you go over here, under finished, I haven't finished this book yet. If you don't like this feature, you just go under format, conditional formatting, just hit the little remove there. But I like this because sometimes I forget that I haven't finished a book. Sometimes I'll have a book that I read before bed, a book that I've borrowed from the library, like an audiobook, and a book that I'm reading at work. And every now and then I kind of forget which book I'm on if I get distracted by another one, so this way I can easily see this book has not been finished yet. Before we go further, you can also see that this line is darker. That's so that if you're scrolling, this is always on the top, and I have it set up on my screen so it's pretty wide, but let's just zoom in so that it's, there we go. So now if I'm moving over, it always shows the title here. So my laptop screen is a lot smaller, so this way if I'm scrolling over to add something, I can easily see which book I'm talking about. Moving on to series. One thing that's important to note so that the graphs and stuff look normal later on, if it's not part of a series, put a little dash instead of leaving it blank, and then if it is part of a series, just write name of the series, what number it is, etc. Moving on to author, pretty self-explanatory, the name of the author. Author's gender, you can really use whatever abbreviations you want, it's just going to show up differently in the graph. So I have F for female, M for male, NB for non-binary. In the past, if I had a book that was co-authored, I would put CO for co-authored. Unless they were both the same gender, then I would just use that. But really whatever's going to make it easier for you. The author's race, you can have it listed out here. Either the country the author is from or the country where it was published. I personally use the country that the author is from, but you can really change it up to whatever you want. This is going to be the year that the book was published. Pages, the total number of pages that it has. Now personally, if it's an audiobook, I just put how many pages the novel itself would have. You can leave it blank if you want, it's completely up to you. For genre, obviously the genre of the story. Now for this one, I like to have it kind of a simplified genre because it's going to make the graph later on look a lot cleaner, a lot more sense. Instead of having like dark fantasy, high fantasy, epic fantasy, etc., I just have it all under fantasy. If this isn't important to you, then you can have this more specific if you want. That's just how I like to do it. Age group is going to be the age group of the story, so adult, YA, children, middle grade, etc. Format is something that I've actually added that's new this year, so whether it's a novel, anthology, poetry, graphic novel, etc. Mostly because I realized that almost everything I read is in novel format, and I'd like to kind of expand that, so I figured tracking it would make sense. For method is the method that I actually read the book in, Sometimes I'll read like partly audiobook, partly physical book, so I just kind of pick one, whichever one I feel like I read the most in. Then for source, I have where I got the book that I was reading. So if it was from my owned TBR, I go owned. If I say borrowed it from a friend or family member, borrowed. If I got it from the library, obviously library. If you're a student, you can put school as a separate one. Really whatever makes the most sense for you. This one is going to be blank for a lot of the books if you don't read many audiobooks, but it is the length of the audiobook itself. If you don't read audiobooks, you can always just delete this column. Just right-click, delete column. Started is the date that I started reading it. Finished is the date that I finished reading it. Days, this is how many days it took me to read it. Now, if you're looking at it quickly and doing the math, it might seem off. That's because if you look up here for the formula, I add 1. That's because, say this book here, March 16th. Say I also finished it on March 16th. It's going to say that I read it in 1 day. If I don't have that +1, it's going to say that I read it in 0 days, and I don't like that. I like it saying 1. If you don't like that feature, just go ahead, go up here, delete the +1, and you don't have to do that for every single one. Just copy, select as many as you want, paste. I'm just doing Control-C and Control-V, by the way. And then it's going to change them all accordingly. But I personally like it this way. It makes the most sense for me. Rating, self-explanatory, what rating you give the book. I use a scale of 1 to 10. If you use a scale of 1 to 5, you just write 1 to 5. And then here are just some other things that I like to track. So because I want to make sure that I'm reviewing as many books as I can, I'm going to have a column here for review. So every time I actually publish the review, I just check it off. Just click, unclick. If it's a reread, obviously I check it off here. If it's an arc, and here I have other and other too. We'll get back to those in a second, but it's going to be something for the stats later on, and it's going to be the one thing that you can kind of mess around with in the XX, but we'll get back to that one. Overall, this is all pretty self-explanatory. Next is the little bought page here. Now, if you don't track the books that you buy, or if you don't buy a lot of books, this page might not be overly important to you. I have, again, the numbers, the title, the series, the author, gender, race, country, year, genre, age group, and format. Those are the same as in the previous page. When it starts getting different, though, is under source, so where you got the book. You can make this as vague or as specific as you want. Under received is the date either that you bought it, or if you bought it online, the date that it actually came in the mail. Then under completed is the date they actually read the book. I always like this because then I can see, under here, time to finish, how long it actually took me to read the book that I bought. Again, I know this page isn't going to be helpful for everybody, but I thought I'd include it just because I like it. Now, we're going to skip the XX tab for now, and we're going to move on to stats. This one is honestly my favorite. So this is going to have the total amount of books that I read, my average rating. I have it to 2 decimal points. If you want it just to 1 decimal point, if you want it to 3 decimal points, etc. This is how many books I started. This is how many books I have that are unfinished. This is the average amount of time that it takes me to complete a book. Then here I have some totals. So total number of pages that I read, the average amount of pages of each book that I read, and the total time that I spent listening to audiobooks. Here in blue are the stats from these checkboxes. So I have how many books total I reviewed, how many arcs, how many rereads, and then other and other too. So when you go in, say you want to change this, in my last one I had how many books were from author tubers. So you would go here and have this match. Ta-da! Then in green is some of the stats from the bought page. This is how many books I bought, how many books I bought that are still unread, and how many books I bought that I have read. I don't have too much about my bought page here on the graphs. I mostly just have it as a list so I can look at it and just a couple of quick numbers. And now my all-time favorite parts, the pie charts. I love a good pie chart. If you're unfamiliar with Google Sheets or if you don't use their charts very much, I'm just going to quickly show you a couple of quick things. So I'm just going to double click it to bring up the information here. This part, I don't mess around with once I have it right, but under customize. So you can have the background color, the border color, the font. For slice label, so for me I have the value 2 and the percentage 40. If you want just 1 or just the other, or nothing at all. You can change that. And again, font, color, etc. Pie sliced. Select and change the color. So say you want standalones to be yellow. Ta-da! Then we have chart and axis titles. So the chart title, so here it's series. If you want to name it something else, under legend, this is the one that I sometimes will change up. So where it says standalone and series here, you can have it to the left, to the right, the top, none at all, labeled so it has actually where it is. So if there's anything visually or stylistically that you want to change with those, that is a quick way to do it. Now, I don't have a graph for absolutely everything, but I do for most things. So I have how many books I read that are part of a series or not, the gender of the author's race, the country, the year. For the year, I have it split up into year ranges. So now it's going to tie in the tab, the XX. This one is mostly formulas and little things that are going to make the graphs make sense. I'll be honest, this is a lot messier than it should be. I'm not a professional coder. Most things I know from just messing around, getting used to things, or things I learned from like Neopets many, many years ago. If you're a professional coder, don't cringe too much at how messy this is. It's just what makes sense in my head. So here I have my ranges. So before 1900, 1900 to 1980s, 1990s, 2000 to 2009, 2010 to 2015, 2016 and 18, and then 2019, 2020, 2021. And then here will automatically fill out with how many, which is going to be here. So I know this says race, but it's just because that's where the formula ended up going. If you care about what formulas look like, have a look. If this is confusing, go ahead and ignore it. But it's basically in the year column on the page 2021, what it falls between. So here, 1900 to 1989, I put this. If you want to change this up, say for example, you want 2016 to 2020, you can change that. Just make this 2020, change this to 2020, and delete these two. If you don't want to mess it around, or if you don't mind these settings, go ahead and keep it how it is, but this is going to be your own copy. Mess around with it however you want to. While I'm here, I'm also going to show you my page ranges. So I have under 100, 100 to 150, 150 to 200, 2 to 300, 3 to 450, 450 to 6, 6 to 800, and over 800. Again, if these ranges don't work for you, I have the formulas here. So there are the numbers and then the ranges. And then again, it will automatically count them here. I accidentally clicked a button, Control Z. So going back to the stats page, as you see here, those are the ranges. The reason why a lot of them are missing are because I only have 5 books filled out on that page, so a lot of the ranges don't have any information for them yet. Same for pages, here we go. And now moving on to some more straightforward ones, so genre. You'll see here this is what I was saying, so if you have everything super specific, it's going to show you have about a bazillion different categories here, and the more tiny slices you may have. If that doesn't bother you, by all means go ahead, but this just takes exactly what you've written under genre here. Age group, method, format, source, time to complete, which again, different categories if you look over on the XX page. Also, I kept most of these in the same order, just so it's kind of easier to find things. Again, here is the range. Now again, if you tend to read books faster than this, slower than this, and these ranges don't make sense to you, you can go ahead and adjust them. We're going to mention if you're changing them here, make sure to also change them here. This is where the graph actually takes the stats from. This is what it's reading. This is basically so that this can count it right. So if you change it in the formula, make sure that this matches. Same with the pages and the years. So now we have the ratings. So again, if you go down here, all of the ratings. If you only have a 5-point scale, you don't have to worry about these ones, but it's not going to hurt anything if you do have it. Again, this is going to automatically count them. Now, one thing is that I always round up. So if you see here, if you don't want to round up, you're going to have to do some tweaking. So let me show you real quick. This is basically just saying that if there's something in there, round it up. Instead, we can just say equals 2021, which means that it goes off the 2020 page. And because I know this is the same column, it's going to be S2. So now this is going to automatically say whatever is in this column. So now we can copy it, paste it, and now the same formula is going to be for all of them, but it's going to say, you know, S8, S9, S10, etc. So now this is going to be exactly how you write it. What I have here, 1 star, this is counting in this range, in the rating range, how many times it just has the number 1. If you want it to be different, say you want to go by 0.5s, just change whatever this one is looking for and make sure that this matches it. Because just like before, this is the actual information that the graph is pulling from. And now this is only going to matter for this ratings graph, which is why I have it rounding up, because that way, just like before with the different genres, it's not going to have so many tiny slices. It's not going to affect the average rating right here. This will go based off of exactly what you type in into the actual ratings up here. For this one, this is going to be for the other 2. So if you look here, other 2, again, whatever you change it to, make sure to change it here, and here, and if we come here, here. So for other 1, I didn't put a graph for it just because of how I usually have it. It's just going to be a count. For other 2, also again, change it here. It's going to have basically how many are yeses and how many are nos. So say, for example, what I had is books that I owned for less than 1 year. So I put less than a year. I would name it books owned less than 1 year. And then here is if it's a yes. So I would say less than 1 year or more than 1 year if it's a no. Then I would go in and say these 2 books I had for less than a year. Now that's going to change my titles here. That's really all this actually affects. It's just the titles here. And finally, we have how many books for each month. This goes by when you finish the books. So it goes based off of the date in here. And there you have it. That is my tracker, my graphs, how I calculate all of my stats at the end of the year. Again, if you guys want to use this for yourselves, it's going to be in the description, linked down below. You can do whatever you want with it. I tried to balance these explanations so that they were clear enough for someone that's unfamiliar with Google Sheets, but not so detailed to either confuse people or be overly annoying for someone that is familiar with the program. But if there's anything that I either skipped over, explained badly, anything that didn't make sense, definitely ask me any questions that you have. I always have my email and my Twitter in my description if you wanted to reach out to me there, or you can just leave a comment in this video and I will happily answer any questions you have. So that's going to be all for today's video. If you guys enjoyed it, please click the like button to let me know, and subscribe to stay up to date with the rest of my videos. I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, usually reading or writing related. So I hope to see you guys next time, and until then, have a great day. Bye!